Really?
Split Fiction is the latest charming co-op game from Hazelight, the studio that brought you A Way Out and It Takes Two. And just like its spiritual predecessors, it's loaded with Easter eggs and references to not only their past games, but to a whole host of popular video games and movies. From Dark Souls to Metal Gear Solid, here are 22 references that you can find in Split Fiction. If you played It Takes Two, there's a good chance you wouldn't want to relive this, but Split Fiction contains a reference, and a trophy to pop, to the brutal torture and execution of Cutie the Elephant, the lovable toy that Cody and May tear apart limb by limb. In Split Fiction, Cutie makes her return as the mascot for the Mastodon pet store. But without mercy, you can tear off Cutie's leg and ear, once again inflicting the defenseless elephant with a level of cruelness reserved for your worst enemies.
Don't have to do this! I love Rose!
Removing the limbs of a lovable toy isn't the only reference to Hazelight's masterpiece. During your exploration of the cyberpunk-like city of the future, you can find giant billboards promoting a blueberry and kale fusion energy drink called Tango, with a slogan telling you that it takes two to tango.
Damn. How about this, huh?
Fans of It Takes Two will also remember Dr. Hakim, the Book of Love and all-round intense weirdo.
See you later! Hasta la vista! Good luck!
Alright, bye-bye now. Crazy book.
Dr. Hakim's face carries over to Split Fiction, with his body now being replaced by a waffle in a fever dream, birthday cake themed side story. Early on, you can also find a tunable radio that lets you pick up a frequency of profanity.
Okay, can you swear here? Can you swear? Fuck the Oscars, you know?
Playing back game director Joseph Fares' most infamous speech at the 2017 edition of the Game Awards. You know the one.
Fuck the Oscars, you know?
Joseph Fares' Game Awards outburst isn't the only live show faux pas referenced in Split Fiction. During the notebook level, you can also take on a large hostile crustacean.
A giant enemy crab appears,
reminding us all of that infamous E3 2006 presentation of Genji 2.
The stages of the game will also be based on famous battles which actually took place in ancient Japan. So here's this giant enemy crab.
Sticking with the notebook level, there's also a reference to the iconic blue hedgehog, while riding your goats on one of Sonic's classic loops.
gotta go fast.
Sonic isn't the only retro mascot that's getting a reference in Split Fiction. In the prologue, there's a very obvious nod to traditional DK, throwing barrels at his Jumpman nemesis, although instead of a plumber, he's dealing with writers and this poor townsperson. Later on, while taking on an ape form of your own, you'll find yourself firing out of organic barrels just like Donkey Kong did back in his country days.
You're making my fur pasty!
That means Donkey Kong Country the game, by the way, not that he had a spell as a country musician, although I wouldn't put it past him considering his jungle beat phase. Sticking with Nintendo mascots and, well, barrels, Star Fox gets a nod during the Train Heist side story, with Zoe calling out Peppy's iconic command.
Do a barrel roll or something!
Do a barrel roll!
Referencing importantly Star Fox, but also in a weird way Google, because when you type in do a barrel roll, it flips the screen, you know, when they did that like 10 years ago, but for some reason it's still there. Weird. Split Fiction doesn't only reference Nintendo games though. At the Moon Market, instead of approaching the giant cat, you can take a small detour to rest at a familiar looking bonfire, or as the game calls it, Moonfire. Perfect for a weary traveller looking to take a break before dealing with a giant feline.
Rest here, weary traveller.
The game show side story features a robot host that has a penchant for testing you and wants to take joy in your hopeful demise. This combined with her mechanical arm form makes for quite an on-the-nose reference to GLaDOS from Portal.
Let us all hope that this aspiring duo will be the lucky ones who get to survive!
Get to survive!
Split Fiction is loaded with sci-fi and fantasy tropes, so it's hard not to feel too familiar to most of the standouts in the genre. But on a couple of occasions, it does feel quite similar to another game in the EA wheelhouse. During the Space Escape side story, you'll have to suit up before you spacewalk, with the process looking very close to Isaac Clarke's. Later on, you'll also need to refill your O2. Again, very common for the genre, but we can't help notice that this process looks a little familiar as well.
a breath of fresh air.
Unlike Dead Space, the Halo references are significantly more on the nose, with a red and blue team in a dropship taking orders from someone who looks suspiciously like Halo's Sergeant Johnson.
Our mission! Seek and destroy the source of the toxin! Are we clear? Woo-ha! Am I right, Marines? Sir, yes, sir! Damn right I am.
Final Fantasy VII also gets a split fiction reference treatment, with the giant factory in Final Dawn looking eerily similar to Final Fantasy VII's iconic Mako-fueled city.
Wow. This place is actually quite impressive, Mia.
There are also enemies that look very close to a sweeper and a giant spider tank that's only a step or two away from Final Fantasy VII's Scorpion tank.
Now that's a big boy.
Another PlayStation classic gets a shout out later in the game when you can load your morph ball into a neatly placed cardboard box, allowing you to stealth your way past enemies until your unhelpful companion shoots the box off your head and exposes you to certain death.
Snake, are you okay? Snake? Snake!
Split Fiction sets its stall out from the off, with a reference to Assassin's Creed coming fast within the prologue, replicating its own version of an assassin's leap of faith with a somewhat clever but mostly corny line following swiftly.
You've got to have faith when you leap.
Prince of Persia also gets a shout out in Split Fiction, with the most celebrated game in the series also getting called out through a line of dialogue in the side story, The Legend of the Sandfish.
Now, let's traverse the sands of time.
Literally.
Literally!
The sandfish in question also directly relates to the next reference, one that finally takes us away from video games and into the movies. Just after the Prince of Persia line, you'll come across a sandfish, a shark-like creature that traverses under the dunes, can be distracted by thumpers, and can be ridden by Zoe and Mio, aka Star Wars also gets its nod in Split Fiction, with Zoe and Mio falling for the old garbage chute into a trash compactor routine.
Back off, you silly ceiling!
Later on in the game, you'll run into a particularly evil version of Mio, a System Shock looking baddie desperate to take you down. System Shock isn't the reference though, with Dark Mio delivering a line that's eerily close to one delivered by Tom Hardy's Bane in The Dark Knight Rises.
What will break first? Your spirit or your spine?
Ah, yes. I was wondering what would break first. Your spirit? Oh, your body!
The motorbike sequence sure may feel like a light cycle Tron reference, and I guess it kind of is, but what I really wanted to highlight here is the Akira-like bike slide.
No mercy!
It's not the first time that this shot has been referenced in pop culture, and it sure as hell won't be the last, but it's always an infinitely cool one to see. The Akira bike slide isn't the only anime reference in Split Fiction either, with the transformation scene in 90s anime show Sailor Moon also getting its nod.
Really? What?
And finally, in Mio's own words, the snowboarding side story is directly inspired by video games.
This idea is inspired by video games I played growing up. Video games?
What starts as a downhill jam opens up for a fairly well-realised trick-based scoring system, reminding us all of the classic extreme sports games of the 90s and early 2000s. That's all the references that we spotted in Split Fiction, but we're confident that there's more. Let us know what we missed in the comments, and for more Split Fiction, including our review, be sure to stick with IGN.